So, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. And I will kickstart our discussion by asking you guys to tell us about your favorite startup. What is your favorite startup today and why?
Start on that side, or do you want to start?
Wherever you'd like. Who you want to start? Go for it, Faysal.
My favorite startup, boy, does it have to already have exited, or is it something that are just...
I would prefer early stage. What we want is, really, you guys have got your finger on the pulse of what's hot in Silicon Valley.
Sure.
We want to know the things that we don't know about yet.
Got it. Well, one of my favorite startups right now is a company called Luminate, which is really capitalizing on the search on images. So monetizing images. On the web, we have AdSense. We've figured out how to monetize words. Google's got a $45 ARPU in terms of monetizing words, but nobody's really figured out how to monetize pictures yet. And this is a company that is monetizing pictures, and as you know, billions of pictures getting added every day. So that whole sector is up and coming. So that's one of my favorites.
Can I just mention I'm actually wearing the Luminate shirt. It's the logo.
Whoa, great.
That was not planned. They are dear friends of mine. They are doing amazing things.
Sure, it wasn't planned.
Someone tweet them and let them know.
Planned.
Yeah, it was incubated in my office, so this is really great to see. And this is the first time I actually have met Ben, so
you're witnessing the herd mentality of Silicon Valley.
We're on the same wavelength.
Okay, well, Ben, tell us about your favorite startup.
It's up to me next. I'll pick two that they're in the same space, and so here I'll write them down because this takes a moment. There we go. So two that I like, and they're both on my first page of my smartphone right now. One is called Human, which is not out officially yet, and the other one's called Connect, which is officially out. And they're both trying to solve this problem of context around your contacts and around your friendships. And so both of them have similar features where, like, I can land here, and it'll automatically tell me, like, these are your friends who are here, these are your friends you're visiting, these are the people that you could see at any time. And then it gives additional context. When I add a person in a contact with Human, for example, it'll automatically figure out, like, all their pertinent information and, like, auto-load it so that I don't have to go finding all their social profiles immediately. And so basically what I found is that there's what a lot of great startups are doing recently is finding ways to not just make connections like Facebook did, but the next level, which is finding real value out of those connections. And those are two startups, and they're both mobile apps that I found useful.
Ben, John?
All right. Well, first of all, I'm never supposed to have any favorites because, you know, we love everybody that we invest in.
All of our children are
they're
equal.
They're all equal. But I will say one of the places that I am very interested in and something that I've been investing in pretty actively is applications of big data behind the scenes to do things. And this isn't 100% a mobile play, but it is actually using mobile quite a bit. There's a company out of Germany called Creditech that is doing big data underwriting, and they'll give you a loan that can actually show up on your mobile phone within about 15 minutes. And you just apply quickly over your phone, and it will do the underwriting. It does big data analytics very quickly and then comes back and offers you a loan. And it can show up as a virtual credit card. It can show up in your bank account directly.
Pretty cool. So to give you a hint, it's not related to Bitcoin. But since we're here to talk about what's next and what's to come, I'd like to take something that's a bit further out. The company is called Spark, and it's about artificial intelligence that finally is getting closer to where we want them to be. We've been promised, you know, smart robots and intelligence helping us making better decisions. What's missing is that as smart as the machines can be and efficient at doing things, they miss the emotional connection. And so this company is working on the emotional level and understanding of human behaviors and feelings. And so when you start mapping feelings to data collections, it's going to be a very interesting world. So they're actually manufacturing a device that is connected to your appliance at home that you can reach anytime. It's your smarter, better self in the cloud. So think about this. We're getting a connected world. We're going to have a self-avatar connected to the cloud 24/7 we're going to be able to connect with and ask questions. And that's where we're going. Just a hint of the future.
Interesting. So I hear a lot of contextualization of information that we have already, right? Things around pictures and feelings, which are things that we don't really hear about a lot at this point, underdeveloped, and data. Okay, interesting. So over the last year, what are some key trends that you've seen emerge? And what are some key trends that you've bought into or you had bought into that you realized were kind of a bubble or fizzled out?
Okay.
Yeah, whoever wants to start. Take it.
Well, I think we can speak for hours on that.
Yes.
Okay, so if you want, I can limit it to a key trend, and a trend you thought was going to be a big hit, but turned out to be a dud.
So I think I'll talk about sort of the trends that we're seeing absolutely take hold. I think you guys all know about mobile, and mobile is absolutely dominating the growth. And that really, instead of mobile, let me just talk about, I'll kind of throw three words around, which is smartphones, edges, and information on people. And that's really what's going on. So essentially, Google, who has an ARPU of $45, Facebook of $7, and Twitter of $3, really trying to figure out how do we get into the Google's territory. And the only way to get that ARPU up is to bring in the edges. That's why you're seeing sort of a tremendous amount of growth in smartphones around images and nonlinear data. So essentially, those are some of the big trends that we think are going to really dominate moving forward, sort of the internet, if you will.
What about something that you thought was going to be a big hit, but then fizzled?
Well, yeah, we don't have any failures. Isn't that sort of the standard VC?
Hey, Noura was talking about failures this
the
morning.
standard
If
VC
you were
is
to
the
say
opposite.
that in the valet, no, we never had any failures, everyone would just like walk out of the room because you were a total liar. There's so many failures in the valley and everywhere else, but that's what you need to have a great ecosystem.
So speak truth to us, Ben.
Yeah.
I'll say a trend, and then I'll say one that I thought was going to be great, but there's real issues with it. I've seen a lot when it comes to bringing social layers to not just to like smartphones, but to all other devices. It's part of the like smart home movement, but it's also being able to share those experiences. And part of it is now I'm going to say one of the company, our portfolio companies, Nplug, recently launched, and it builds these amazing software for digital billboards that, like if you're in a bar and you can like tweet and you can Instagram, you can talk about that restaurant or that bar or that location, and it'll all appear there contextually. And allow, like, I was in a bar and everyone was having a lot of fun actually like posting stuff up on there, not unlike having a tweet wall, but much more advanced and for everybody. And so I think that there's a lot of, like, social has yet to jump to all the other devices, just as, how Apple recently announced, the new layer for building applications, smart home, and all that sort of thing. Now, you were talking about a trend that is not, here's a trend that is not working completely yet, and someone will solve this, but it hasn't happened yet, and that is wearables. And now, while we've seen a lot of wearables, the problem is that I don't see anyone much wearing many wearables right here or anywhere in the audience. And the reason is because after 3 weeks, generally, and this is the general rule,
right.
After 3 weeks, people don't wear it anymore because it takes, like, you have to charge it every day or every couple of days, and people lose the habit. And so until we can find a way to make wearables that last for weeks or months and become habits rather than just like little accessories, wearables have a little bit of an issue becoming truly mainstream.
So let's take a straw poll of the audience, if we will. Number of people here who are wearing a wearables or who have worn a wearable recently? Wow.
See, that's a small number.
That is a small number.
How many of you have ever bought a wearable? See, look at that, exactly.
Well, but how many Samsung in the groups, Samsung watches?
No, I think Ben's right. This 3 weeks seems to be the norm because it is just I think the value proposition isn't there, but I think that is changing very rapidly.
But look at the data. I mean, Fitbit has collected enough steps to go from Earth to Saturn, right? That was a stat on Mary Maker's slide. But that's incredible. Back to the data issue. How do we make sense of it? How do you measure it? How do you apply it in the right context? But I'd like to take a stab on what you said. It's not so much about the industries and the trends, but look at the trend in investing. I think that's very interesting. Silicon Valley talks about disruption into the venture landscape. What's happening? Well, I think venture is going global. I think DFJ was one of the first ones to go there, and he's learned some tough mistakes and had to scale back. But ultimately, we're now in a world that is more connected. You look at the major tech companies in the United States, 80% of their user base is outside the US. 80%, the top 25 companies. This is, in mind, 80% of the revenue might be in the US still, but I mean, this is a growing trend. We are 1.2 billion people connected with smartphones, and actually that's going to double by the end, it's going to be 2 billion by the end of this year, I think. I mean, this is the macro trends you're dealing with. So you look at those trends, And you look at the fact that now you're able, more than ever before, to build value with less capital. And I think that's why you're seeing the trends you're seeing in the region here, that all of a sudden, with a lot less capital and talent, you can do a lot more.
But although you did see that all the numbers were pretty small, right?
Yeah, I
Compared
think so.
by
I was
Silicon
gonna
Valley
say-
standards.
I was going to say...
It is, but the inflection point actually has, the ability to deliver a lot of value and create value. By raising $250,000, you can do a lot these days, and especially here when the cost of labor is so much cheaper than Silicon Valley.
I don't know about Dubai being the
I was
cost
gonna
of
say,
labor.
we still have a ways to go on the venture side, though. I think a few of us are trying, but there was a recent PwC study that talks about venture trends. 1/3 of all the venture money that was put out in Q1 was in Silicon Valley. Second third was in the rest of the United States, and the other third was outside of the U.S.
Right.
No,
But I
There's
think
still a
that-
lot of work to go.
Yep.
So I want to discuss that further because I believe all of you have an interest to a certain extent in emerging markets. So and we were talking, Faysal and I yesterday, we were saying this panel is a little bit self-selecting, right? The people who agreed to fly out 15 hours are the people who are interested in MENA. Otherwise, most VCs, we're a blip on, barely a blip on their radar, right?
Right.
So
Where's Andreessen? Sorry.
but to keep our conversation going, so definitely smart everything is hot right now, right? And we've already mentioned a little bit about the limitations of smart, whether it's wearables, whether it's connected devices. We have a video coming up in a little while about some of the new connected devices that we're seeing in the market. I'd like to understand, we've already covered a little bit about my question, which is how much of this is hype. But I would like to understand where you see the first real applications going to be, or which industries you feel are really going to be first disrupted by these devices, by automation, by smart devices.
I'll take a crack at it from two perspectives. About 4 years ago, we started a company in robotics, which was smart indoor navigation, essentially doing hardwood floor cleaning. It was a company we spun out of Idea Lab. Within 3 years, we built it. It had full indoor navigation, GPS that kind of kept track of the robot, and within 3 years, we built it and got a wonderful exit at iRobot. So in terms of smart devices, and it keeps maps of all your rooms, keep maps of everywhere it's been. It knows exactly where to go to clean what, and so on and so forth. So it's a very interesting from that perspective. But I think on the wearables, what I am seeing is, if you look at the biggest market, healthcare, $2.7, $2.9 trillion a year, of which about 600 billion or so can be towards preventative. So I think ideally, like talking about, instead of using a device for 3 weeks and then forgetting about it, if you really can incorporate, how can a device like that help you preventative from medicine perspective? That's a huge market.
So,
if you were to ask the question again, instead of how many wearables have you been wearing, how many of you has a cell phone in his pocket, right? Smartphone in his pocket, and that's where Apple is going. They're trying to measure a lot more data about your health and well-being by just using the phone without adding an extra device, right? So
everyone's aware that this was announced recently at the WWDC,
Right.
that Apple is integrating these new features into the new operating system.
Right.
But, so Faysal, I'll push you on this just because healthcare is notoriously old school. Yes?
Well,
so
yes.
you're telling me that this is going to be the first industry disrupted? I have
Well,
a hard time believing that.
So for healthcare, it really depends on what angle you take. Just like certain industries are easier to get into than others, right? If you're trying, for example, to build an education company and you're going directly after schools, you're going to have a hard time because they take a long time to make decisions and it's hard on budgets. But if you're going after like the developers that already have relationships with the schools, you might have a better chance. And there's a company called Clever that actually does that. And the same kind of thing in healthcare. If you're trying to like push a new medical innovation, there's a lot of regulation in a lot of countries and a lot of approvals that can make it really difficult, which is a real problem. But there are other ways that you can improve and add to health without having to go directly in those channels. And so what I kind of call it is disruption on the sides of these industries, and then it slowly goes towards the center.
But I think that's where Faysal was going, where production and healthcare is not something that as regulated because it's kind of self-monitoring,
Exactly.
self-help, or even education. I mean, we had a conversation with Faysal last night, and I said, look, my kids, they are 6 years old and 3.5 years old, and I'm afraid they're going to be part of that gap generation. And what I mean by gap is that they're going to be the kids that are not going to get the kind of tools in their hands using technology that we have available today to educate them in the way that they will be in 15 years. the education is 20 years behind, and they need to recreate a whole new way of educating using the content we've had on paper for centuries and putting that online in a way that is interactive, engaging, gamified. And that's going to take a while. So I believe in self-education and augmentation to the standard programs that you find around the world.
Yeah, so I was going to just add, I don't think it's industry specific in terms of looking at it that, oh, this industry is ripe for disruption or this one is. If you look across the board, pretty much any industry has opportunities for disruption. You'd have to solve a problem within that space. And I think what we're seeing with wearables and in healthcare is that diagnostics and things that are not as regulated are easier to penetrate. Education, where it's direct to consumer or adding value to supplementary education, we're seeing huge opportunities there. I think if you go into financial services, it's the same thing. If you try to change the credit card companies, that's not going to happen.
I mean,
but if you offer alternatives, that gives you an opportunity to disrupt from the side.
There was a stat recently, I went blown away. So in China, right, they have Alipay, I think, and they had an application they launched to do investments, right, fund management. They raised, so by integrating, this app was integrating mobile payments on this platform that is mobile in China. In less than a year, they raised $89 billion. I'm repeating that because I know Dubai and its financial center. $89 billion, that mutual fund became the third largest fund in the world after Fidelity and Vanguard in less than 1 year. I mean, talk about leveraging the power of mobile and having people changing behaviors and using mobile to capture even just making payments. I mean, it's incredible the power it has. So talk about disruption.
Yeah. Can I share a disruption story on education? I think is fascinating because it relates to where I went to school. Audacity is a new way of essentially distributing classwork from universities. And Sebastian was a professor at Stanford and also as a Google executive started this program. And he's teaching an AI class, maybe about 30, 40 kids in the class, or maybe 50 kids in the class. But he opened it up to everybody in the world. So he said he'd get about 300-400 people sign up. He had over 100,000 people sign up. And by the end of the class, and this was free, by the end of the class, the top 42 students were not from Stanford. They were from somewhere around the world.
Well, and then I think Stanford taught in a matter of 2 years the equivalent of 350 years of education by having massive online classes.
So we're in one side today in the world where unless you have a great education, you really have no hope. On the other side, disruption is coming where you can get a Stanford education for free. And I think his concept is for $100 or $200 a month, you can actually get your homework graded and actually have live chat with somebody who will answer your questions. So, so those are sort of the disruptions which are pretty interesting. 1,500 kids can get into Stanford a year, but you could teach millions the same content by the same people interactively. That's disruption.
But then I think you should put that in context with ecosystem, right? Because we heard earlier, and I think it's very important, around the world, every government is looking at GDP growth through technology innovation and job creation through the startup movement. They're like, wonderful, we're going to have a bunch of kids getting out of the statistics because they're going to get in business for themselves. And that's fine because I think actually it's working. You look in America, the majority of the jobs have been created by small businesses. We heard the statistics, I think 95%. But so the question is, are you able to take advantage of this local talent? And sometimes the ecosystem is not there, right? It needs to mature and the mindset has to change, and that takes always a long time. Because we heard Silicon Valley is more mindset than a location, but there's also a certain critical mass and people around that makes it a unique place.
So I want to pivot the conversation a little bit, and I want to talk about chat and social media. So I'm interested in whether you, as panelists, use WhatsApp.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
All of you. So I was sitting with someone at I believe it's Kleiner Perkins, and she was talking to me about how they basically passed on every chat app because no chat was big in the United States when these chat apps started, right? And if you asked our audience how many people here on WhatsApp, I think, how many people are here on WhatsApp? Yeah. It might be close to 100%.
It's the way to communicate internationally.
Yes.
Well, it's free for one thing, so when I'm traveling, it's great. I save, I don't want to pay that $1 to AT&T every time I send a text.
So given this backdrop and the massive acquisitions that have happened, acquisitions and investments, whether it's Alibaba's investment in Tango, Facebook acquisition of WhatsApp, where do you guys see this space going?
Well,
go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, obviously the space is huge, but I will say the space is maturing. When you have a like $19 billion acquisition, you know it's starting to mature in some way. Is there opportunity? Absolutely. But this is now why you see Apple, like for example, putting in Snapchat and WhatsApp like features into its product. And like, I wouldn't invest now today in like a new chat app unless it had something extraordinarily different. Because it's like this market really is starting to mature in a way.
But with regards to the existing players, we have a lot of them, right? Are we going to see these? Are we going to see an eventual winner or two
what
winners?
you see is the fragmentation. You talk about the trends.
Yes.
I mean, initially you had one application doing many things, and now you are basically saying, oh, for these 5 friends, I'm using WhatsApp because they are in this part of the world. But you know, these guys in China, they use WeChat. So I'm basically having multiple applications serving the same function for different people and different purpose. I mean,
I think we'll see some consolidation. I mean, the fact that Apple is adding all these functions into their core product tells you that we're trying to get to a point where people are on one or a small number of platforms.
But I mean, you look at the size. Go ahead and Faysal.
But I think it's important to understand why is this so critical, right? Because why does Facebook pay $19 billion for 450 million subscribers, right? It's a really interesting question, and I think what we're seeing is what the audience is doing right here. Almost everybody here is on Snapchat. So first of all, it's global. WhatsApp. So sorry.
Ask them about Snapchat shortly. We'll get them to confess.
Yeah.
They're on WhatsApp because it's global, and that's where the growth in smartphones is coming from. So that's the growth that you want to capture. And also in terms of monetization, clearly these companies have figured out that sort of the node where you're sort of one person communicating to many versus one person communicating very frequently to their network is more valuable, is more monetizable. So in terms of monetization, sort of a broadcast versus one-on-one is a lot more monetizable. And that's the reason why I think these things have taken on such a huge valuation.
I mean, you know, people are always looking at the numbers and think they're staggering, but I say it's all relative, right? When Instagram was acquired for $1 billion, everybody cried fools. But it was one of the fastest growing network at the time, and for 1% of the market cap of Facebook, they were able to acquire it and take the competition away. I mean, WhatsApp was no different in my mind. Those guys were growing much faster than Facebook. They were basically international, and that's in the inflection point. They had done the same thing to the other social network before them, and so they saw the play happening again, and they said, let's take the competition out.
Yeah. Plus, it gave them the mobile angle as opposed to...
Absolutely, absolutely.
So.
I just want an app that sends me cute animals. Real cute animals, which is why I have puppy messages.
Real
right
cute
here.
animals.
I want an app
gonna
that
say
I want to have a
BuzzFeed.
cute animal in my hands.
Okay, so let's actually jump into Snapchat. I have to say, I used it recently for the first time. I was like, I'm in the tech business. I really need to understand this Snapchat thing. And then beyond sending lewd messages or nude messages or whatever it is, I do have to confess I didn't really understand the point. And I would turn it to the audience. How many people, if you would be willing to be honest, have installed Snapchat?
After that introduction.
Have installed Snapchat. And how many people don't understand Snapchat? Maybe that's a better one. How many people don't understand Snapchat? Why it's popular? Okay, well, at least I have some compatriots in the audience.
I tell you one thing. I mean, I was on a panel not too long ago, and basically IVP was talking about it, institutional venture partners. And I think a light bulb went in my head when he was actually said, look, people think it's to send nude pictures or whatever, self-destroying pictures. Actually, the most popular usage for Snapchat is 16 to 18 years old girls that snap a picture of their outfit before they go to school to make sure that the girlfriend don't wear the same t-shirt or the same dress.
So I want to expand on that just a little bit.
Yes.
So this is how I understand Snapchat and why it really does work. If you're going to post a picture to Facebook or to Twitter or to a public network, you're going to take a little bit of time trying to get the perfect shot, maybe take a few shots, make sure before you share. Snapchat, doesn't matter. It's going to disappear in a few seconds. You'll just take any shot, and you'll share faster, and you'll share more, because you're not thinking immediately of, oh, I have to make the perfect picture. And so you'll just share what actually is happening. And I have friends who are just like, quick video of, this is what I'm doing right now. And, they're not thinking too hard about how it's going to look perfect, but it's giving me a real-world view of this is what they're actually doing compared to other networks.
And it has helped,
I think the most important application I've seen is the teenager texting what they're eating. Our kids, the first thing they do at any restaurant, dish arrives, Snapchat.
But
this
Omar,
is what I'm
didn't you
eating.
think that the UX? I mean, this is where I think the genius of Snapchat is.
I got lost, I have to say,
the
initially.
U-
No, no,
But maybe
but
I'm dating myself.
look,
I mean,
Yeah.
I-
Well, I don't
As
use
you
it.
press-
That's the.
The UX, right? As you press to that video, that picture, there's the gamification aspect. You hold it and it's there, but the second you remove your finger, it stops and you can still see it. I mean, I don't know how you felt about this, but actually I think it's brilliant in the way they designed it, because they introduced gamification as part of the process.
Yeah.
So I want to ask more about this ephemerality question and privacy and ephemerality, right? I don't understand it because when I talk to people, I actually do want a record of my conversation with them. Like I want to know what I told them.
And you're in the minority.
Well, most conversations that I have, I want recorded, and maybe I am in the minority. But I would ask you, will we see this? Will we see more things emerging in this space? Do you guys have some specific,
Yeah, I think so.
some
absolutely.
specific
Absolutely.
applications or companies that you would highlight to us?
Have you seen like the rise of secret and whisper? And there's a different like that. There's still the anonymity, so it's a different kind of like FM. I can't even say the word anymore. It's a different take on it, you know. There is this kind of like anonymous or short term or you know
It's
like
the
type of
non-searchable, right? It's
yeah,
the
yeah.
non-searchable web. You have a searchable web and a non-searchable web.
I mean, like you just have to get to like talk to a couple of teenagers and really understand like they don't like Facebook to them is like email. It's like your email functionality. They know they have to have it at some point to go talk with family or parents or whatever, but it's not a thing that they love to use. They love to use things like Snapchat and Instagrams, and they're going to be using more of those things that are like short term because then they can easily delete the record. They don't have to worry 10 years from now when they have a job like.
I mean, yeah, we've all done silly things, right? So when you're in the youth part of your cycle, there's a lot of things you might not want to be recorded forever. And I think we live in a world where digital is everywhere, and that identity and that history is being maintained forever, and there are things that you might not want to have forever.
And I think if you just think about the way people live at any age and at any stage in your life, there are things that you want public, there are things that you want private,
So,
and so
and I
that
appreciate
part of the
that.
web is
I'll push to ask you about a company or two that are interesting in this space, right? We've all acknowledged that this is important. So what are one or two interesting companies outside of Snapchat in this that are taking care of our privacy or leveraging our interest in ephemerality?
Interesting, secret.
yeah, I
but
think Ben's
that-
secret is
In Silicon Valley, at least, it's like the app for gossiping, and it can be really interesting and really, really like salacious, which you know we all like. That's interesting. Or it can be really damaging. Like I have seen like some people post some really mean things about myself and a whole bunch of others because they don't have the veil of like they don't have any filter because they're anonymous on Secret. And Secret, if you don't know, is just app where you post like anonymously and your friends can see anonymously what other people are anonymously posting. The whole point is anonymity. And so people just post anything.
Well, it's an outlet.
Wow, the
It's human
unfiltered
nature.
conversation, as if the internet was not unfiltered enough. Here we have yet even less filtering. Other companies that you guys might mention to us in this space? Nothing comes to mind?
No,
Okay.
yeah.
So what about the next big thing? I feel like I kind of missed the boat on Snapchat when it was coming up and didn't see it coming. Anything that, in terms of the social networking space, that we might not see coming that you think is going to be, it's going to hit it out of the ballpark?
In the social networking space.
If you know,
Or in
let
the
me know.
social space. Let's not call it social networking.
Anyone that
Social
improves
space.
LinkedIn search and technology and can mine that thing efficiently, I would invest in. Seriously.
Yeah, I think what's predictive analytics on your digital footprint. What I would love to see is predictive analytics on your daily digital footprint. Because from the morning you wake up to the time you go to sleep, everything is being recorded from where you've been, what route you took, what did you look at, who did you talk to, and how do you sort of look at predictive analytics on that so tomorrow morning when I wake up, it tells me what I need to do or what I should do.
I would say instead of thinking about the next wave of social media, it's applications of that data that we're starting to see, and a lot of that is less interesting actually. It's more enterprise applications. There's a ton of people doing work around who's the right person to talk to if I'm trying to make a sale based on understanding their footprint on the web and things like that. There's a ton of predictive analytics going into business-to-business type of
I think
application.
So what you were saying about-
Omar is setting us up. He says, here's a panel of VCs from Silicon Valley. I'm going to have them talk about stupid social media thing.
Really? Now I feel bad for the
first world
question.
problems.
No, on the contrary. I mean, I think that's very interesting here. You're saying, especially context around and searching things like professional social networks like LinkedIn, or understanding those professional relationships.
Right.
Okay, so tell us about emerging markets. Where do you think there are opportunities in emerging markets? Are there opportunities that are unique to entrepreneurs in emerging markets?
Yeah, I think there's tons of opportunities in emerging markets.
Other than
Wait, we flew over here because we see huge opportunities in emerging markets.
I mean,
I was specific here to say opportunities unique to entrepreneurs in emerging markets, right?
well, so
beyond the copycats, because we've got a lot of those.
But I guess I would actually say, copycats has a negative connotation. From my perspective as an investor, I don't have a problem with it. And I have to tell everyone that what I see in Silicon Valley is hundreds of copies. I can't tell you how many people copied Groupon. I mean, there were thousands that tried to do different takes on that. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And realistically, what I like is an entrepreneur that understands a market and takes something that works someplace and applies it to that market, because that's a hard problem. That's not an easy thing to do. So I think those opportunities are very interesting. And when you look at the infrastructure that exists in, say, the United States versus emerging markets, it's very different. So building something that already exists in the United States in another market is not something to be, is shooted or to be thought of as negative. It's actually a very positive thing. And what we're seeing is a lot of the infrastructure is leapfrogging. It goes straight to mobile, but it's being done very well, and part of that is based on understanding what's already been done in more developed markets.
Ben, you look
No,
like
I have a theory in scaling of markets, and certain markets, frankly, are inherently better for scaling the kind of companies you need, the next Facebooks and such. And the theory, and this was actually something that I talked with Nicholas Zennstrom, the founder of Skype, a couple years ago in Dublin about. And it's the reason why, for example, in Europe, we haven't seen, a major multi-billion-dollar company really come out of there since maybe SAP, is because it's so inherently difficult to scale a company in Europe. Because if you start a company in France, you can only get to a certain size, and then you have to change not just the language, but the culture of your product for all these different areas. Now, there are 4 key areas where you don't have this problem. That is the US and English, and not just English, but that also means you can go to India and you can go to the UK. The second one is Chinese, because it's just such a huge market. Third is Spanish, because it's such a shared language across cultures. And fourth is Arabic, because despite different cultures, there's a lot of similarities, and the language has a big base. And so those are, if you're trying to scale a product, those are probably the 4 best languages to go with. And that's, I will say McClure is one who's talked about that a lot too. But the big thing about it is that a lot of times when I go to emerging markets and I talk with entrepreneurs in emerging markets, they're not usually talking about products that really scale, that can really turn into the big companies that really make that long-term impact globally. And so that's a thing to really think about. And in emerging markets, you have to really think about, is this product something that could really scale in this specific market? And is this a market that has the scalability inherent to it?
I think that kind of reminds me of a really interesting company that we invested in here in the region, which is really coming from that background, really understanding how do you scale into multiple languages day one, because that is something in US, sitting in Silicon Valley, we don't start a company and think about, well, how do I do this in Arabic, or how do I do this in Spanish even, right? We don't need to worry about that till after IPO. So the local investment here, a company called Cordoba, which actually starts with that in mind. It goes kind of faced with that. How do you do globalization? How do you address content creation in multiple languages from day one? And so those are interesting solutions, because sitting in US, you may not even think you need that. You wouldn't necessarily start something of that nature.
Right, and what I'm saying is that gives some US companies some inherent advantage, because they don't have to put any resources towards thinking about that until much later. And that gives a little bit of a disadvantage to some other regions, for better or for worse.
Sure.
But I tell you, I think we talked about education being accessible anywhere in the world, and some of the best education in the world now at a cost that is fraction of what it used to be. You have access to technology and power that you would not have before, and everything's turning as a service. So we are an accelerator in Malaysia, we are one in Korea, we see deal flow from 40 countries. And I can tell you, I see amazing innovations and products, that some of which have global potential, but as you mentioned, the entrepreneur sometimes doesn't even think global, right? They just think right in front of them. But it's about the ability to take that talent and give them the opportunity to build something meaningful and potentially global. And that's hard.
So what will it take? I mean, we have a number of regional funds, as I mentioned in the opening, where the funds are growing, the amount of capital is increasing, but we are still seeing very little interest from established global funds in our region, right? And I try every year, go out there, and we went out to London, we met with GFJ, we met with Index, we met with Excel, and none of them are here today. I think part of the issue is that, we're just at the edge of their radar. And I'd be curious to hear from you guys, as people who are interested or potentially could be interested or working in emerging markets, what would it take for us to get on their radar, to get them interested in the Middle East?
I would say that I've been looking at this for a long time, and as
Really?
you know, I fly all over the world, and I've invested. There's definitely a gap between early stage investment, which includes angels and some of the smaller funds, my fund and some of the others here would qualify in that category, and the bigger funds, whether they're London-based or Silicon Valley-based. And the bottom line is, it's going to take exits in order to get them to move. And I think really the way to try to change this or to solve this problem is not to try to get them to move. Mark Andreessen's not going to fly over here to invest in companies because he can sit in his office and wait for them to come.
But look
to
at
him.
the trend. Sequoia just invested $100 million in Kupang in Korea, right? They just supposedly raised $500 million for a fund in India. So I think back to your point, we are all here ultimately raise money from third parties, and we have LPs to respond to, and ultimately we need to be successful at investing that money, and so we need to return capital. And so you need to look at that long-term play and say, okay, can this region, this part of the world produce exit in the next 5 to 7 years that will make my fund, right? And then ultimately, size of the funds going bigger, maybe it's good if you need more scale to scale across regions. But at some point, if your fund is too big, you can't play in certain markets, and you have to catch every outliers. And then your only differentiation at that point is money. And so you're going to pay up.
And I think one of the other things that we're seeing is, companies you can move. You can address multiple markets from any location, basically, these days. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't attract U.S. or European investment. It might mean that you'd move the company later as you get to that point in your evolution, but you're going to have to scale to attract really the big VCs.
I was going to say, I agree with John, but I really put it down to when you really want to get attention, one breakout hit. And so there's two reasons for that. The first is that having a breakout hit in a region or an area gets the attention of investors, like, oh my God, there's something happening here, we have to go move. Frankly, investors, we are typically followers more than leaders, for worse, frankly. But the other reason is because that also injects lots of capital into a region or a city. And so part of the reason why Silicon Valley, the engine keeps moving, is because every couple of years you can expect a multi-billion-dollar exit, and that money gets invested back into the ecosystem because those people become angels, they become investors in funds, they become investors themselves, and you need that in order to really drive up the kind of capital you need to build up a region. So if there were a breakout hit, like a 5 billion, a 10 billion, or even even a little bit lower.
In that region, you don't need to
right.
big,
And then that money gets invested into funds here, and that becomes new investors, and that becomes just new access, and that's what's really needed. But someone has to have that breakout hit.
I would agree. We invested in Prezi. They were in Budapest, 5 people. Today they have 200 people, 15 Silicon Valley, 150 employed back home. I mean, they are a success story for the country. Yeah. A lot of youth is inspired by the success and wants to start their own business. Angel investors want to invest into the next kid. And so you need to create success stories because they really inspire legions.
I was going to say, but the thing that you see that's in common with a lot of these is some of these breakout hits end up having a pretty significant presence in Silicon Valley over time. And so I think as you look at this, at least in the short term, there needs to be a certain level of patience, because the stats last year were that there were actually more exits in the U.S. relative to the rest of the world than there were the year before. So it was even more concentrated last year than it was the prior year. So it's not changing dramatically, but we are seeing where companies in Budapest, companies in Germany, companies in Korea are attracting U.S. capital. They have to get to a certain scale, and they probably need to be a global presence.
Okay, interesting. So if you want to attract global capital, you got to get global size.
Well, think bigger.
Yes.
Think bigger is a big issue in a lot of up and coming regions. I personally want to hear more of that. Like, we will dominate this region, but we can totally and absolutely go global. Not because we're not just the blank for this region, but because we're building something fundamentally different than anything else that's on the market.
Yeah, so, great. So I want to open the floor for Q&A. We've got about 10 or so minutes left. So questions from the audience. Raise your hand and we'll get the microphone over to you.
Come on, don't be shy. 14 hours on a plane.
I know, come on.
Guys, this is
And
your
we
chance
had our
to ask a
coffee this
question.
morning too, so we're good.
I mean, I
Take
have
a
more-
risk, ask a question.
Okay, we've got a question over there. Hamad Arabi.
Yeah, please stand up and,
And
just
introduce
say your
yourself.
name. Yes.
Yes.
No, the
There's-
mic
oh,
is
there
We
was
got a
someone
microphone
else.
coming to you.
Hello, thanks. My name is Mohammed Arabi. I'm CEO of E-Commerce C, a startup doing e-commerce in Saudi Arabia. I wanted to ask about the Bitcoin trend. Is this one of the areas of focus for you? Do you see a lot of future investments in this area from your funds? Thanks.
Which area?
I'm sorry.
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
We had to talk about Bitcoin.
Of course we do.
It's
We,
Want-
I skipped it and it's on our description, but I didn't get to it. But
You want to go first?
I think it's a very interesting area. We're seeing tremendous deal flow in that space, both in terms of sort of the e-commerce wallet side, but also finally interesting back into the real hardware. I just saw a deal last week. This team, world-class team out of sort of the Intel Semiconductor, Big Cray Computing, and they've come up with sort of 1,000 to 10,000 to 1 faster mining of Bitcoins architecturally, doing completely new silicon hardware.
There you go. Silicon Valley going back to gold digging.
Yes, exactly.
So it was really for
We're
the first
building
time
shovels.
I've seen something which is really
Supercomputers.
not just let's just put up a data center, in Iceland and run it and sort of rent it out at $250 a Bitcoin, and the person can make hopefully 400 or whatever.
So Tim Draper has an
Yes.
ATM
So-
for Bitcoin.
So I do a lot of investments in financial services, and I would say that I think Bitcoin is the best chance to disrupt the overall transactional platform around the world that we've seen probably in the last 30 or 40 years. And there's a reason behind that. It's because if you just said, okay, I'm going to change the Visa network, and we're going to have people start paying someplace else, that doesn't happen. But the adoption of Bitcoin and the use and all of the different use cases for Bitcoin around the world are very compelling, and the adoption rates are off the charts. So I think that we have a real opportunity to change some of the way transactions are done globally through Bitcoin. And then secondly, I think the other thing that people are starting to look at now is there's a real genius behind the blockchain, and that applying the blockchain to a lot of things outside of Bitcoin is going to be very interesting, whether it's contracts, whether it's other things like that.
Exactly.
And we're seeing tons of companies that are going after that, and I think we're going to see a lot of things based on that,
So-
just overall based.
Very quickly, one of our general partners, Matt Schlicht, is also the founder of a company called Follow the Coin, which is a major media publication on Bitcoin and digital currencies. And they have, not just Bitcoin, but the founder of Dogecoin and the founder of Litecoin and others writing stories and pieces on it. What I believe is that the benefits and the value add of a decentralized currency makes so much sense that it's inevitable that that will be a big thing, whether it's Bitcoin itself or another alternative currency or something else built upon the blockchain. I'm not 100% certain, but the value of it itself, of a decentralized currency that can go across borders, immeasurable.
Yeah, I don't know about decentralized, but definitely efficient currency, right? That's the whole point. The pain point has been, hey, I've been paying massive amount of fees to the bank's infrastructure, and that infrastructure is no longer needed. I buy mostly digital things, and I'm going to need a digital currency. So I think that's where we're going, whether it's going to be the right one or not.
Wow, panel is, consensus on the panel that Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies or peer-to-peer currencies are inevitable and are awesome. Questions from the audience?
Another question.
Questions? Right there.
up back
Will you
there.
stand up?
Yeah.
Hi, Grant from Afgar.me, a startup investor here in the region. You, apart from Bitcoin, you've talked predominantly about consumer products, B2C. I've seen the Internet of Things being brought up on the Twitter fall a few times. What about that kind of data analytics and knowledge side of things? Are we just going to leave that to the IBMs and Ciscos of the world, or can we get some
They're welcome to buy it from us later on. No,
I
look,
think
massive space and security is another topic we haven't touched on, but it is becoming super important. You've seen the battles between the US and Europe about where's the data lying, what can you keep record on me or not, and how do you make sure that the data is not being tampered with. Some interesting technology emerging around that space as well. So it is definitely, every time you know, there's this like, oh, what is this Meraki company, just $1 billion exit? Nobody's heard of it. You know, so the enterprise, the elephant in the room, is where some of the biggest numbers are, and exit's going to become from.
So go ahead,
And
and
I
then
think
I'll
if
ask
you-
everyone this question, which is like, tell us your favorite enterprise company.
Okay.
So everyone can think about that.
I think there's, you know, enterprise, if you look at macro trends, especially in the Valley, enterprise investing has gone, it's dramatic. It's a huge percentage of the investments coming out of Silicon Valley these days, and I think that trend is here for a little while at least. And if you look at, we had the question earlier about what are the things that are, you know, real trends versus things that maybe don't happen for the long term. Applying big data and analytics to different problems, especially in the enterprise, is just starting, and that's a massive trend. And it's partly because we're enabled by different companies and different platforms. Things like, I've got a couple of favorites.
And just see, like-
Cloudera is an amazing company.
We have their founder actually speaking.
Oh,
so
nice.
we're really excited for that.
That wasn't
Yeah.
planned either.
Yeah, $4 billion valuation.
Yes. Cloudflare is another one that I think most people don't realize, but about 70% of the internet traffic in the world goes through a company called Cloudflare that also protects most websites from attacks without anybody even realizing that it's happening.
Other favorites, gentlemen?
I mean, if I was talking about big ones, I love Cloudflare a whole bunch. There's a whole different, like in a whole different ones. Like, I love what Palantir has done as a business. It's a bit of a secretive thing, but they've done a great job of finding like these intricate patterns in weird data sets, and this is why I have context here. A lot of the great new enterprise companies are doing that. A smaller one that I also like is my friend's company is called 15Five, which is basically building the successor to SuccessFactors and making a better way for like group collaboration within teams and being able to rate your team members and being able to find out where the inefficiencies are. Like a lot of the great enterprise companies have this mix of consumer and enterprise in their Yammers and Dropboxes and such.
Well,
My
sorry, go ahead.
So my favorite that kind of encompasses both enterprise and security is a company called Airtight, which actually does both, provides internet to anywhere you are in the shopping mall, to all your fast food places, and all the login and all the big data analytics behind who's there, who's doing what. And on the other side, it actually protects the White House, the Pentagon, the State Department. All those are protected, so the airspace in all those buildings is protected, and you cannot use Wi-Fi. So it has both. It has on one side, it provides you the Wi-Fi, and the other side, it protects those environments from people bringing in rogue devices and plugging into a network and accessing, confidential information. So I think the whole concept of security and login Wi-Fi is a huge growth opportunity.
So, and I'll leave you with one company called Guard Time. So watch for that one on the security space and compliance and maintaining integrity of your data.
So we have the time for one more question. If I have one more question from the audience.
Come on, audience. You can do it. Don't be shy. Oh,
A risk taker here, a risk taker.
A VC right here.
Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen, for the panel and for all your insights. Especially you're looking at emerging markets. So how do you see yourselves moving into emerging markets? What is the model? What is the approach?
Yeah, maybe I'll start because we have launched last year in Malaysia and in Korea. So we are seed stage investors with a hands-on accelerator format, 12 months, very hands-on. Our differentiation is that we actually, while we live and breathe in Silicon Valley, we look at innovation around the world and try to bring the most differentiated technologies and startups into the heart of the valley to scale global. In that process, we actually have 3 ways to expand globally and secure access to deal flow and innovation. One is in joint venture format with local players. We don't know everything, but partnering locally with players that have access to deal flow, relationships on the ground, understanding of local context, very important. Another one is a lighter partnership where we actually helped bridge some of the most successful companies in your portfolio or in your accelerators or incubators into the valley, assuming that they have the potential to be global. And then another one is just by meeting at events like this and building a trusted relationship over time.
So our approach is, I call it a network-based VC. My partner is the founder of the large global education platform called the Founder Institute. And we work with their network of over 3,000 CEOs in 40 countries, again, to help us find deals, and then not really as much just to find them, but to actually be there to help them and mentor them, because the 2 keys to building companies and scaling them are education and understanding, and which includes help and mentorship from people who have been there and done that, and then the second is the capital. And then on the capital side, we feel there's a gap between sort of angel investments and small early stage friends and family type of investments and the amount that you need to get to scale to where a larger VC is going to put money in. So we write checks in the 500K to 2 million range and try to bridge that gap. About 70% of our investments are outside of the US.
So Dominate Fund, for those who don't know, what we specialize in, and the one thing we specialize in, is coaching startups on how to capture attention and accelerate their growth. Part of that's based off the book that I have coming out next year, Captivology. Part of it too is our experience in press and branding and marketing and coaching our startups in those areas. And so we look specifically for companies that can really benefit from that expertise, no matter where they are. And so that's why I talk a little bit about global, because if we're going to pour that kind of fuel on a company, we want to make sure that they're the kind of company that can really expand, not just and dominate their region, but really expand globally. And then for us, in order to find those companies, I think a lot of that will be partnerships with great investors, because typically we don't lead. We're usually the 2nd or 3rd largest investor in a round. And in that case, we'll work with other investors in that region that'll have the expertise on the ground of that specific market. Because we won't have that specifically, but we'll want to partner with others that do and have around that. We want to have other people that can really help, shape a company and make it whole.
I'll give a simpler answer. A lot of miles on Emirates Airlines. Flying back and forth.
Great. So
You get it free upgrades now, Faysal.
a closing comment for the audience?
Well, I think you failed your panel by asking what's next. What are the one big thing that's going to happen, right? I thought that was like the topic.
Yeah. So you're saying we haven't discussed?
Well, I'm saying I tell you what's going to happen. I'm surprised nobody's wearing a helmet, because in the future there's going to be a bunch of drones flying around here. So watch for a lot more things flying. The airway is going to become not congested on the traffic and the car side, but I think you're going to have a lot of things flying over your head. In your house, outside, delivering. I mean, look at Google. They're investing in satellite, for God's sakes.
Excellent. So parting thought is drones and flying automated or unmanned vehicles.
That's right.
Anyone other parting thoughts? Key thing that you think we didn't discuss on this session that you'd give to the audience?
I think crowdfunding of hardware platforms, watch out for that. It's very interesting. VCs have stopped funding those a while back, and crowds have really picked up. And with the 3D printing and what's happening, 3 years ago we were using it pretty much just for prototyping and testing things. Today, our companies are using them for actual manufacturing. So there's pretty interesting trends there.
I think I'm going to repeat something that I believe it was Ben that said earlier, and that is that you got to think big. Think about scaling beyond where you might otherwise think. Go for bigger markets, go for big opportunities, try to make sure that whatever you're going after, if you're starting a company, you're taking a risk anyway. So if you're going to take a risk, you might as well go after a big risk, because it's the downside is about the same, the upside is much bigger.
Exactly.
I'll go with advice for the entrepreneurs out here. Who's entrepreneur here, by the way? Investor, social media guru. Oh, we have one. I'm sorry. You have to
two.
leave now. Two.
No,
You guys
no,
have to
we
leave.
have-
I'm sorry.
We have a lot more of those. They're just now raising their
But-
hands.
So there are lots of factors for why startups fail. First thing is you're going to almost certainly fail a whole bunch of times, and don't let that get to you. But two things that I find, especially in outside of maybe the central zones of like Silicon Valley and a few others, of mistakes that are typically made, is a lack of research, especially among competition and what competitors are doing where. And I guess probably the other one really is not thinking about the global impact and the global market that they're actually going after, and frankly, ideas that are too small. Because like I've seen a lot of pitches the last couple of days here, and from the Middle East, and I will say overall the pitches are better than actually most regions. But very rarely have I seen discussion of like, this is the market size, this is the plan for expansion, this is the kind of long-term broad strategic vision that we have. And that's something that you really should think about and you should really go for. Even if you're not today going to be going after that, you want to have that ambition.
Great. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us, for flying over, for the discussion. Thank you.